Today, I want to present to you a different perspective on the Serapeum in Saqqara. As you know, the Serapeum is an ancient temple of the god Apis, located in underground galleries, where there are sarcophagi, giant stone sarcophagi made of basalt and granite, in which, according to scholars, the mummies of sacred bulls, the Apis bulls, were buried. Let's take a look at a different perspective on this temple, one presented by independent researchers. Thank you for watching our channel. Give us a like, subscribe. Your support means a lot to us. We love you. Watch, leave your comments.
Imagine descending into a labyrinth carved into the rock beneath the sands of Egypt. In the dim light of your lantern, massive black sarcophagi loom before you. Each stone structure, weighing dozens of tons, is carefully tucked into narrow niches along the sides of a long corridor. This is the Serapeum of Saqqara, one of the most mysterious structures of ancient Egypt, inspiring awe and debate to this day. What is this place? Why was a necropolis of such unprecedented scale built here, deep in the desert? The story of the Serapeum of Saqqara is like a puzzle, where mainstream science offers one solution, while seekers of alternative knowledge propose something entirely different. We are setting out on a journey through facts and hypotheses to peer into the shadows of antiquity and try to understand who, how, and why created this mysterious complex. In the mid-19th century, archaeology was still a romantic science of discovery. In 1850, a young Frenchman named Auguste Mariette came to Egypt in search of Coptic manuscripts. But fate had other plans. Hearing from the locals about unusual sphinxes buried in sand near Saqqara, Mariette began excavations and discovered an avenue of sphinxes leading to a sand-covered entrance in the rock. Behind this entrance was a chain of underground galleries, and so the Serapeum was revealed to the world. In the following seasons, Mariette cleared most of the complex. There he found numerous cult artifacts, thousands of funerary items, narrow burial niches, and most importantly, monolithic sarcophagi made of granite, basalt, and diorite, each nearly 4 meters long. In total, there were more than 20 of them, arranged along the main corridor. Most of the lids, weighing 25 to 30 tons each, had been shifted or opened. Inside the sarcophagi themselves, to Mariette's disappointment, there was almost nothing of value. Apparently, robbers had been here long before the Europeans. Nevertheless, he discovered 2 intact burial chambers with mummified bulls and rich grave goods, an invaluable confirmation of the purpose of the complex. Around and inside the Serapeum, about 60 stelae were also unearthed stone slabs inscribed with texts. On them, priests from different eras recorded the biographies of the sacred bulls. The year when the Apis calf was found, the years of its life, under which Pharaoh had died, and how it was buried. Thus, official science drew a conclusion. Before us is a unique centuries-old necropolis of sacred bulls. The official version of events. According to Egyptologists, the Serapeum was established in the New Kingdom when the worship of Apis reached its peak. Every time the old bull died, priests from all over the country searched for a new black calf with a special white mark, a sign of divine incarnation. The discovered calf was enthusiastically placed in the temple in Memphis. He was surrounded with honor and worship. After the death of such a bull, it was customary to embalm him and bury him with honors, like a pharaoh. During the reign of Amenhotep, around 1350 BC, the first ceremonial burial of a bull was carried out. Each newly buried bull was accompanied by an inscription dated to the year of the reigning pharaoh. Judging by the inscriptions, the series of burials continued into later periods as well. The last known Apis bull was buried during the time when Egypt had already become a province of Rome under Emperor Augustus, around 30 BC. Thus, the chronology is clear. The Serapeum was in use for about 13 centuries. After that, most likely during the Christian period, it was forgotten until its discovery by Mariette. The engineering of the Serapeum is also explained by scholars in a completely rational way. The granite for the sarcophagi was brought from Aswan, which is 800 kilometers away. The basalt came from an oasis in the desert. Archaeological finds confirm that the ancient Egyptians knew how to work with such materials. They had copper saws and drills, which they used to cut stone with the help of abrasive sand. There were hard diorite hammers for rough shaping, grinding stones, and quartz sand pastes for polishing. Of course, the scale of the work is astonishing. Each sarcophagus was hollowed out from a single block and polished from the inside. But Egypt had plenty of manpower and time. Construction could go on for decades. Transporting and installing them was a separate challenge. It is believed that the galleries had no roofs during the placement of the sarcophagi. They would simply dig a wide-open trench, along which the multi-ton boxes were dragged on sledges, using inclined planes and rollers. In the Serapeum, remnants of ancient structures have indeed been found, possibly those very runners or shafts. On the ceilings of some corridors, you can see places for fastenings. Perhaps there were cranes or winches installed there to maneuver the cargo. One of the Greco-Roman texts mentions, what about the sarcophagus? The Apis sarcophagus was made from a single piece of expensive stone and lowered into the burial chamber using port sand. Archaeologists reconstruct the process as follows. The chamber was completely filled with sand, then the sarcophagus was placed there, and the sand was gradually removed from underneath it. Under its own weight, the sarcophagus would lower smoothly and evenly to the bottom. The niches, an amazing display of ingenuity. Overall, everything can be explained technically without resorting to miracles. Official science, as it were, says, yes, it's grand, but it was within the capabilities of the ancient Egyptians. We underestimate their skills, but they were outstanding engineers of their time. However, when you listen to this coherent official version, doubts inevitably arise. Has everything really been taken into account? Aren't we oversimplifying reality for the sake of convenience? One of the main mysteries is the level of craftsmanship displayed in the making of the sarcophagi. The granite surfaces inside and outside the boxes are so finely finished that they rival the work of modern precision machinery. Indeed, even armed with all the known ancient tools, accomplishing such a titanic task would be. To many engineers today, this seems almost impossible. Without mechanization, inside some of the sarcophagi, certain properties can be observed. If you produce a low sound, the box begins to resonate, amplifying that sound. Such an effect is possible if the surfaces are parallel and polished like an acoustic resonator. The materials, quality, and precision of the workmanship of these boxes are comparable to the Barabar caves in India, which possess incredible acoustic properties that may have been the very reason for their creation. Did the ancients really do this on purpose? If so, then why? For what purpose did they need singing stone chambers? Deep underground? If not, then how did it end up being so precise by accident? The sarcophagi of the Serapeum are some of the largest monolithic boxes ever created by humans before the modern era. Each one is almost 4 meters long, over 3 meters wide and tall. The walls are more than half a meter thick, the volume of granite is enormous, and the total weight is about 70 tons including the lid. For comparison, that's the equivalent weight of 2 Boeing 737s, moved through a narrow underground passage. Archaeologists explain it like this, but you know, the pyramids, they lifted 50-ton blocks there, transported 300-ton obelisks, so they managed here too. Yes, The ancients knew how to work with massive stones, but the case of the Serapeum is special because here, enormous weight is combined with exquisite precision. Usually, in a pyramid, the roughly hewn blocks don't require jeweler-level polishing, just the general shape is enough. Here, it's the opposite, perfectly flat surfaces. The joints between the lid and the box are literally airtight. What good would that do for a bull mummy? It gives the impression that the function of these boxes went beyond that of a simple coffin. What if they served some technical purpose, for example, to keep some contents or energy isolated? This is just a hypothesis, but these are exactly the kinds of questions alternative researchers are asking. Why are the lids on the boxes shifted? Robbers usually didn't bother moving such heavy things. They would just punch a hole and take out the contents. But here, it clearly looks like the lids were deliberately shifted and left that way. Alternative historians have a favorite rhetorical question. Did the ancients really haul hundreds of tons of granite 800 kilometers underground just to bury a bull? Seriously, let's try to imagine the motivation. The priests want to honor the god, so they build a luxurious tomb. But they could have just used a limestone sarcophagus, which is what they did in earlier times. Why insist on using ultra-hard granite, which is so difficult to work with? The official answer is this: it's more expensive and lasts longer, and so, it's more honorable. But here a logical contradiction arises. Then why weren't these royal sarcophagi finished properly? After all, 80% of the boxes don't have any inscriptions at all. The plaques with the names of the sacred bulls look much less fancy and expensive. They're made of limestone, and it's clear that not much money was spent on making them. Some of them even look like they were made in a hurry. From the creators of those polished inner corners, you'd logically expect that every box would be named and marked. But that's not the case. Many of the boxes have nothing on them, and on some, the hieroglyphs look more like scribbles. Andrei Sklyarov and other researchers have noted that these inscriptions are clearly much more primitive than the objects themselves. It's as if some descendants found these ancient smooth boxes and just scratched something onto them. This thought comes up because the difference in craftsmanship is enormous. And archaeologists, dating the sarcophagi by the scratched-in names of later pharaohs, could be off by thousands of years. At least, that's what the alternative theorists believe. The second contradiction lies in the logic of the historians themselves, the external finishing, which clearly took place and served a purpose, but not always a decorative or informational one, as you would expect from an object meant for ritual use. It's hard to say for sure, but the fact that even small cracks in the stone were polished suggests a need for the product to be strong, not necessarily revered. Everything points to a much longer history for these objects themselves, not just a single act of creation. Maybe they were made in one era, but used and painted in another. It's a radical idea, but it does explain the oddities. So, if we assume that the official history, for one reason or another, is leaving something out, what do alternative researchers suggest? First point, a more advanced technological agent is required. Either the ancient Egyptians themselves possessed lost technologies, or someone helped them. Whether it was the legendary Atlantean civilization, aliens, or gods, Christopher Dunn, being an engineer, supports the first option. In ancient times, there could have been advanced stoneworking technologies. It's just that no direct evidence of them has survived. He points to the mysterious bases made from hard stone, pipes, perfectly symmetrical statues, a whole range of artifacts that, in his opinion, require the use of machinery to produce. For him, the Serapeum is a vivid example. Dunn does not believe that you can achieve a mirror-like inner corner in granite using copper chisels. He suggests the use of some kind of machine devices. In the book Lost Technologies of Ancient Egypt, Dunn analyzes tool marks on worked surfaces and finds parallels with modern milling methods. Of course, these conclusions are disputed by scientists, but Dunn goes beyond simple technique. He looks for purpose and arrives at a bold hypothesis. The Serapeum, he suggests, might have been part of an energy complex together with the pyramids. How could this have worked? Dunn and his like-minded colleagues talk about resonance, electricity, even Earth's energy. It's possible that, when filled in a certain way, these granite chambers served as batteries or generators. Today, this sounds like science fiction, but it's curious that such ideas were prompted specifically by an engineering analysis of their precision. After all, it's true such extreme precision is usually needed for technology, like engine parts, and not at all for tombs. So, maybe the sarcophagi weren't meant for bulls at all, but for something like ancient equipment? This theory is highly speculative. There is no direct evidence, but it's popular in alternative circles. All the more so since it's supported by the authority of Graham Hancock in his book Magicians of the Gods, which discusses ancient megaliths from a technical perspective. Hancock, however, leans more toward the idea of a lost civilization, something like Atlantis. He suggests that thousands of years before the known pharaohs, there was a people with advanced architecture, and that some of their structures could have survived into the era of Egypt and been repurposed. In the case of the Serapeum, this would imply some kind of protostates or even extraterrestrials. They created these tunnels and boxes, and later the priests of Memphis found them and thought, this is a perfect place to bury our sacred relics. That's supposedly why there's a mismatch in styles. High-quality granite versus rough hieroglyphs. Skeptics object. Where is the evidence of an earlier civilization? There are no obvious artifacts that can't be explained in the usual way. But Hancock's supporters argue that the objects themselves are the very artifacts you can't explain. So, you just ignore them. For example, analyst Brian Forrester states directly in one of his videos, Egyptologists prefer to ignore those objects that don't fit their narrative, and the megalithic sarcophagi of the Serapeum don't fit. And indeed, many guidebooks only briefly mention the underground chambers for bulls and don't emphasize just how phenomenal these objects are in terms of craftsmanship. In alternative circles, there is often debate about who exactly could have been the mysterious builder. Theories range from the legendary Atlanteans to extraterrestrials. The Russian researcher Andrei Sklyarov leaned more toward earthly explanations. He suggested the existence of a civilization of ancient gods that flourished even before the flood, 12,000 years ago, and left behind megalithic structures all over the world. The Serapeum. He included it among them, along with the Baalbek terraces, Pumapunku in the Andes, platforms beneath South American pyramids, and others. Sklyarov admitted that there is little direct evidence, but there is indirect evidence in favor of precisely this hypothesis. Not all alternative theories are so global in scale. Some try to explain the function of the Serapeum without resorting to magical technologies. One of the hypotheses circulating on forums links the Serapeum to some kind of ancient experiment. According to this idea, the granite boxes could have been chambers for chemical reactions or for storing special substances. For example, there was the idea of electric batteries, an analog of the Baghdad battery, only on a gigantic scale. Supposedly, acid or alkali was poured into the box, metal electrodes were inserted, and electricity was generated. Another idea, sound therapy. The Serapeum as a temple of sound, where priests in enclosed resonating chambers would enter altered states of consciousness from standing waves. Each sarcophagus as a chamber resonator tuned to a specific frequency. This is indirectly supported by the aforementioned humming effect. But no inscriptions, texts, or myths indicating such a use have been found. So, we have two pictures. One is academic, supported by discoveries and the traditional understanding of history. The other is bold, filling in the blanks with guesses about lost knowledge. How do they coexist? Unfortunately, in many ways, there is confrontation. Official representatives of archaeology often call alternative theorists pseudo-historians and fantasists. Regarding the Serapeum, skeptics point out that clear evidence of the bull cult was found, and that is enough. Why make up anything extra? They also note that alternative theorists are often simply unaware of the actual findings. In response, enthusiasts like Hancock and Caden accuse official science of being closed off and dogmatic. They claim that any ideas outside the mainstream are immediately rejected. They ask people to pay attention to unexplained details. Another point of debate: what is more important, the data or its interpretation? Academics say we have artifacts, texts, and context. We interpret as little as possible. If we see bulls, it means it's a place for bulls. The alternative theorists respond, but you yourselves discard some data as noise. For example, that very precision of workmanship. You don't even try. You don't try to interpret it, because it just doesn't fit into your model. And there's some truth to that. For a long time, official Egyptology didn't pay much attention to publishing technical analyses of sarcophagi. They were studied as objects of art and religion, but not as feats of engineering, and only under pressure from public interest. In recent years, there have been studies where scientists measure and explain the quality of the workmanship. However, skeptics from the alternative camp still find these explanations unsatisfactory. Interestingly, after many years of conservation, the Serapeum has been reopened to visitors. The Egyptian authorities understand the value of this site both for science and for tourism. In 2012, after restoration, tourists were allowed in for the first time in decades, and many who have visited in person leave with eyes full of awe and bewilderment. In reviews, people write that photos don't convey the scale. You have to see it to believe how they did it. You could say that the Serapeum itself is more convincing than any argument that ancient Egypt still hasn't revealed all its secrets to us.
We're walking through the desert. We're approaching a well-known place called the Serapeum. And really, just as other researchers have described, this is truly a desert. There's nothing here, no temples, no pyramids. Well, to be precise, there are pyramids, but over there you can just see a little tip sticking out. And a bit more around here. Basically, there's really nothing here at all. That's a mat. Oh, wow. How big is it? Yeah, that's a mat. Is there a mat inside? There's a mat inside. Are they trying to pull it out? Yes, that's 24. Sarcophagi granite from Aswan and Sudan limestone, 11. Edge. This is a massive block of limestone. It weighs 50 tons. 50 tons, you ask? Wow, how did they get it in there? They put it in the casing. Inside is the mummy's casing. The casing is the mummy. Zika Museum. Oh, okay. How did they get it in there? I don't understand, because there's only about 15 centimeters left on each side. And there's absolutely no height, none at all. Yeah, very good. This one is 50 tons and that one is 30 tons. Altogether, that's 80 tons. Yeah, 25 tons, 100 tons, and a bull inside. Okay. Here, Carl, look, Carl. Yes. Abyss. Yeah, I see. He says there's a bull drawn there and that there are bulls everywhere here. That's why they were lying down. Yeah, interesting. But here, by the way, the hieroglyphs are pretty good quality. Andre, what exactly are you patiently waiting for? And just as we previously discussed and confirmed, yes, the floor level is indeed noticeably raised here, but honestly, it is certainly not elevated by a full meter. It is merely a slight, almost imperceptible elevation. Yes, absolutely. We can clearly observe that every intricate detail and design element has been meticulously carved and precisely etched onto a highly polished, reflective surface, showcasing exceptional craftsmanship and attention to detail. The hieroglyphs are roughly carved, and supposedly that's enough to claim ownership. Wow. It goes pretty far, about 15 to 20 meters. And it ends. There is a dead end, nothing. No, also no finishing. No finish, like an unfinished tunnel, that's what they think. The passage is almost blocked by the sarcophagus.
We found a video on the internet from 6 years ago where some guys go past this sarcophagus. The long, narrow tunnel ends in a disproportionately large chamber, filled with debris and clearly not in its original state. And although, according to the guide, there used to be a relatively small sarcophagus here, which someone dragged into the passage, the creator of the video suggested that this might be an as-yet unexcavated section leading to a deeper level of the Serapeum. The link to their video is in the description. The video creators also managed to get behind a closed door, where, besides a broken decorative granite block of a shape unusual for this underground complex, perhaps the largest sarcophagus in the entire dungeon is hidden. Its height, together with the lid, reaches 3 meters. It wasn't possible to find the exact dimensions online, but the weight of such an object could easily exceed 100 tons. The sarcophagus is cracked, perfectly polished, and geometrically precise inside. The lid is shifted, just like the others, which is not at all typical for tomb robbers who, according to official science, are responsible for the absence of bull mummies in these boxes. At the same time, judging by this footage, such a lid was securely fixed, literally snapping into place under its own monstrous weight, which is comparable to that of a Boeing 737. Before moving it, you would first have to slightly lift it. So, the ancient robbers would have needed an arsenal comparable to that of the supposed creators. People, ropes, loops, supports, capstans. Instead of just lighting a fire, heating up the wall of the sealed sarcophagus, then pouring water over it, and breaking it open bit by bit if it didn't fall apart on its own from cracking due to the temperature difference. But no, the ancient robbers lifted 30 to 40 tons and carefully shifted it. And not just here, but in almost every case. What's troubling is that for many historians, there's no contradiction here. They just moved it, just polished it, just carved it, just transported it across the desert and over mountains for hundreds of kilometers from the nearest waterway. And indeed, most of the megalithic boxes of the Serapeum are made not from soft types of stone, but from harder ones, the hardest, in fact. Among them are porphyry and several types of diorite. Yes, the very same diorite that ancient craftsmen supposedly used as stone hammers for working the material. Only slightly less hard are the granite quarries, since diorites have the highest hardness. But then, what did they use to extract and work these stones? In Egypt, about 30 deposits of hard stone are known, but almost all of them are located in the mountainous regions of the eastern desert, hundreds of kilometers from the Nile riverbed, and it's a bit of a pity that official science doesn't see anything particularly interesting in these ancient processes.
By the way, there are very fresh traces here on the walls. But at least it is difficult to correlate them by age with the sarcophagus itself.
Yeah.
Yes. Let me remind you that, according to one version, sarcophagi have always been here. They were simply found in the thickness of the limestone. Well, maybe so. Here too, look, such rough marks. What kind? So, well, there's no polishing here at all, none. It's just been carved out. Not leveled in any way, although its walls are very straight. Let's go. Yeah, here they are. Huh? Oh, wow.
And here, in this precise moment, they have indeed accomplished their objective, a remarkable feat that can be directly attributed to the diligent efforts and instrumental guidance of Kurleiser. This successful execution represents a significant milestone demonstrating their exceptional capability, meticulous planning, and unwavering dedication throughout the entire endeavor. The culmination of their hard work, strategic foresight, and collaborative spirit has led to this triumphant outcome, serving as a clear testament to their collective prowess and the effective implementation of their well-conceived strategy. Kurleiser's involvement was absolutely pivotal, providing the necessary direction and expertise that ensured every step of the process was handled with precision and care, ultimately leading to this highly anticipated and successful conclusion. This achievement stands as a powerful demonstration of their commitment to excellence and the successful realization of their ambitious goals, with Kurleiser's contribution being an undeniable factor in this notable triumph.
Yeah, it's also very big. We can see that there are fastenings here, or rather, some kind of technological recesses. But basically, in the other sarcophagi, nothing like this could be seen. And here there are also some other marks, also most likely of a technological nature, because they follow a fairly clear grid. But there is none on this side. Yeah, oh, it's going down into the suspension. AAA, this sarcophag goes much deeper. Granite, Aswan. Aswan for done. It closes. Dr. Shrez Franze in the kitchen and Momi in the Egyptian Museum. Momi is a carpet men. Carpet, Abra the squad, 2000 BC. What are you ready for?
This is the same as this. Yeah, so, a very similar sarcophagus in a very similar room. Here you can see that the technological holes, by the way, are much more crooked than the sarcophagus itself. And it's quite possible that they were made later specifically to install some kind of jacks here. That's what I think. Is this basalt? Basalt from Sudan. Ah, and that's granite? They don't really advertise the fact that most of the sarcophagi are made from stones that don't grow in Aswan, but are located several, sometimes hundreds of kilometers away from the nearest riverbed of the only nearby river. And so, once again, there's no explanation for how these megaliths were transported. They weigh around 60 or 70 tons, and the raw blocks for them weighed hundreds of tons, sometimes 200 tons. Basically, no one thinks it's necessary to explain to us in detail exactly how these were brought to the river, how they were transported, so that we wouldn't have any questions left about this most ancient chapter of human history. I really wish I could trust the scientific foundation, but unfortunately, for now, that's just not possible. Original floor. The door is new, facing us. So here, the floor in the corridor is only about 30 centimeters deeper. But here, wow, there's a pit, it's 2 meters deep, and you can also see that the sarcophagus goes even deeper. So yes, all the sarcophagi we've seen so far are at different levels. And this is Aswan granite? Yes, I'm starting to recognize it already. This is Aswan granite. How much does this weigh? 50. 30 tons? 20 tons? Yeah, altogether 50 tons, with the inside 100 tons. Wow. The craftsmanship on it, honestly, is beyond any comment. And by the way, Tiamek, zoom in right here. You can see that it's worked up to about the waist. The upper part is polished and maybe even buffed, while the lower part still has rough finishing. And these same curves, by the way, I'm sure these technological recesses were made later, just to lift the lid. Because there's no way you're lifting this lid by any other means without those recesses. That's it. They didn't make them here, by the way, but you can still see the jacks were wedged in anyway, because there are chips in these spots. The polish is really beautiful, seriously powerful polishing, but you can see the surface isn't perfectly flat, most likely. It was also sawed off somehow. But the traces, hopefully they'll let us get close to at least one sarcophagus to take some measurements. Very beautiful. So, and the depth here is even greater. Wow. And this one is blown up. That's dynamite. Yeah, dynamite. They couldn't open the lid of this sarcophagus at all, so they blew it up. And we can see here that the inside is polished even more than the outside. Everything in there is shining. And the depth here is 1.5 meters. Some of the walls, as we can see, are straight and well made, but the walls have been dismantled. Apparently, there used to be neat walls here, yes. Here they went. The arches are very solid and the folds too. There was literally only about 20 centimeters left on either side of the sarcophagus, and that was it. But the walls were built up, though, as we can see, not everywhere. But this, of course, is power. This is top-quality craftsmanship. Although you can also see that it's not perfect, and the tool was most likely guided by hand. But how could someone do this by hand? Well, it's unfathomable. Wow! This is very interesting. Looking at these sarcophagi in person, you immediately realize that these aren't some ancient machines. They're not megasaws, everything was done by hand. And there are quite noticeable irregularities there. So these sarcophagi are far from perfect, infinitely far, but nevertheless, there is a significant presence of engineering, of certain technologies, and a clear striving for perfection in them. I just want everyone, when they think about how the outer and inner surfaces of the sarcophagus were made, to understand that in this case, with the sarcophagus, we're not just seeing a corner of about 90 degrees, give or take a degree or a degree and a half. As some researchers quite rightly point out, there's nothing ideal here, not even close to the standards of the barrels, but nevertheless, in almost every sarcophagus, we see 6 excellent planes that intersect at right angles to each other. And all of this is an enormous added difficulty, both for the designers and for those who actually made these things. At every stage, the hassle involved in making a box that was only used once increases exponentially. Even if it was a ceremonial occasion, we still have to add this drop, if not several drops, to the technological image of the ancient Egyptians that we all have in our minds. And, to be honest, I think the version put forward by alternative historians is closer to reality than the one offered by official historians. Despite the enormous difference between these two approaches. All right, a long passage. Why are there no sarcophagi? They took it out from here. Look. Wow, they actually managed to somehow drag it out. Look, and this one is dented, and it looks like it was hit with a shovel or something, like we saw in Aswan. Yeah, basalt from Sudan. They used the hardest types of stone. Look, this one is really crooked, really crooked. Either it wasn't finished, or it was reworked, but the surface is really uneven, though it's also polished. This definitely wasn't done with a saw. You can't do that with a saw. Looks like it was done by hand, finished by hand. Alright, let's go take a look further. Damn, they're all massive. By the way, here only the lid is uneven, but the base is very flat, well, pretty flat, at least. Okay, the walls are equally thick, and the inside is completely polished, which is really strange for bulls, honestly. And the lid here, yeah, it shows signs of some major reworking, like a piece broke off from it. About 5 centimeters of the top layer is missing for some reason, and after that there's some pretty precise finishing, but not from this angle. Yeah. This lid is all full of pits. You know, these pits seem kind of unnatural to me. Obviously, no one can tell us how these even appeared on such a structure. Oh, and here, do we have a barrel-shaped base? Some people suggest that, like, water was dripping through this passage, but that just sounds like nonsense to me. No, 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 there was no water here. If there was even a little water, the crack would be huge. Look, see, on one side it's almost flat at the bottom, and on the other side it's got a bulging side, really noticeably bulging. Yeah, this sarcophagus is crooked. On one side it's really uneven. It's unclear. Alright, let's move on. This is basalt here. Is there any connection between the material and the condition of the walls? Here they're badly damaged on one side, but still, my friends, there isn't a single hieroglyph, not a single letter, on most of these sarcophagi. Still, yes, the surfaces, well, this is basically just like the Barabar caves. The quality, well, visually at least, of course. If we get the chance, we'll definitely check it more precisely. We usually compare the smoothness or roughness readings of ancient surfaces to those of internal combustion engines, because they're all around us. Their design and operating principle are easy to explain, so the requirements for the smoothness of their parts are pretty clear to most people. So, the main indicators from the stone boxes are comparable to the surfaces of cylinder head blocks, which have an H5 precision class or 0.4 micrometers according to the RA parameter. In some places, the polishing of granites and granodiorites reaches N4 standards, which are required for pistons, piston skirts, and cylinder liners 0.2 micrometers. And it's rare for this indicator to go beyond the limits typical for cast surfaces of cylinder blocks, class N7 1.6 micrometers. At the same time, tests of modern, undoubtedly machine-processed facing granite surfaces give us very similar figures. Overall, the indicators are quite unstable across the surface. Could this be evidence of manual work? But the quality standards are very, very high comparable to modern ones. In fact, you can see from all the boxes that they were made by hand. That is, the craftsman's tool was held in the hand, not mounted on a machine. But while the surface shape is still characteristic of hand tools, the precision of these surfaces and the right angles is not typical at all. Unfortunately, for modern science, even attempting to replicate the processes it so boldly describes deep in history seems, apparently, to be beyond its capabilities. But you have to agree, until we can prove definitively and experimentally that everything we see in the ancient world was indeed created with primitive tools and sheer human perseverance, this topic will remain unproven, which will continue to breed doubts in various alternative theories. And I must say, quite justifiably so. These little pits, by the way, are really quite interesting. They're not just on top, you know? They're also on the right side. Let's keep going. It's pretty close. Yeah, I'll try to take a couple of photos. Look, it's really tall. It's 3 meters high. And it's standing on slabs. Look, you can see here that it's standing on slabs. So for some reason, they just didn't dig all the way down to the original floor. It's about 2.5 meters, and they covered everything with a slab. All right, next one. Wow. But why are they all so uneven, really? And here you can see, look, that these are special pits. You can clearly see they're polished, and inside they have a distinct oval shape. These pits here were made with some kind of tool. They're all polished and buffed. This crooked part, this piece here, it's all been polished too. And well, these are definitely marks from attempts to open it with jacks. Because honestly, without jacks, there's just no point even trying to get close to them. A 30-ton lid, how? Phew, yeah, this is all really, of course, fascinating. Here it looks like as if there was some kind of passage. All right. Is this granite here?
Yes.
Here there are some grooves. You can see marks on the polished surface. Besides the dents, there are also long grooves. Here they did it differently. They hollowed it out a bit to fit their jacks in. Otherwise, of course, it's amazing. Yeah, this all really has that ancient vibe. This isn't masonry. These are just plastered and painted elements made to look like blocks. Here they are. These aren't real blocks. And here, look, there's more space, right? Here, there's almost 1 meter on each side. A very good specimen. Something happened here too, as we can see, with the edge of the sarcophagus. Most likely, there were stone defects that were removed right away. They were definitely polished out. Unlike the sarcophagi we saw at the Cairo Museum, where they couldn't fix the stone defect and just carved the hieroglyphs right over it, here that's not the case. But there aren't any hieroglyphs here either. Hi, Stephen, Michael. You know, there's something here that's worth mentioning. All of this is really, really hard to do with hand tools. Yeah, I know, I've tried. And since we can't polish this by hand, maybe it's chemical polishing. And I think that's proven by the curved corners on the inside, where you can't reach with any tool. But there's this kind of rounding. And you can see these marks all around the perimeter. Yes. And chemical polishing is actually a really good fit. So you identify chemical polishing by the absence of any marks from other tools? Yeah, that's exactly why. And I also think that all this wasn't meant for burial. There was something here with high vibration and pressure. The thing is, any crack in this case would cause the original box to break apart. Come over here. Yeah, granite is very sensitive to cracks. Yeah, look here. You see here, it's broken. And here, there were probably cracks. See how the surface is all made with indentations. And if you want to remove a crack, you have to take it out all the way to the bottom. That is, you have to go all the way to the start of the crack. And if you don't do that, the stone will just crack. That's why I think that here, and on other sarcophagi as well, what we're seeing is the removal of cracks. Here, they've removed all the cracks on this lid. Yeah, okay. And really, if you think about it, this treatment of cracks, which was done in such a careful way on almost all the sarcophagi, doesn't fit at all with ritual services. The thing is, historically, there's a pretty large period of several thousand years when we weren't around, but human civilization already existed. And, thank God, throughout almost this entire period, human civilization had the strange habit of burying its people in rather interesting locations and conditions. And almost always, these burials were full of decorative elements. So, luxurious sarcophagi with plaques in some amazing underground chamber don't surprise us in the slightest. What surprises us is the technological aspect of this matter. We're amazed that engineers can see clear traces on the sarcophagi. The presence of some kind of engineering thought. They can recognize a kindred way of thinking, even across the centuries. So, you approach this sarcophagus. You see that there's no bull's face drawn on the sarcophagus, no honorable name inscribed, no scenes from its life depicted. None of that is there. The only thing we do see is that, for some reason, even the tiniest cracks have been removed, and not in the most natural way for hand grinding and polishing granite. Which, of course, also raises questions for us, as if this removal of cracks was somehow crucial. It interested the ancient people, and they devoted not only time to it, but also had a specific, specialized set of tools for the job. So, unlike us, they actually understood very well what was going on. We're the ones left to guess and try to piece together facts that don't really fit, hoping that, well, things were just strange back then. Let's go over here. I'll show you on this one. Come here. Look here. There was a flaw in the rock here. They removed all of it. There was a crack here. A crack that was completely removed. And they removed all the cracks from this sarcophagus. And this surface is flat. If you polish it by hand, how would you get shapes like this? Yeah, they would all be smoothed out. You'd have to use some kind of template. Right. Here it is, the crack. There, you see, it was cracked there too. They polished everything out, because if you have cracks in the stone and you apply a huge amount of pressure, or if there are some kinds of vibrations. And I'm not just talking about audio frequencies, but also up there, to radio frequencies and even further into the gigahertz range. And if all of that is vibrating, the stone just cracks if it has any flaws, whether on the surface or inside, it doesn't really matter. What? The same thing happens inside? Yes, but inside it's much more precise. And all of this appeared later. These rough lines, these little drawings, or whatever. Yeah, just a simple nail hit. Yeah, they just hammered it with a nail. Yeah, something like that. The people who made this, they didn't make the boxes, these lines, it's impossible. Oh, I saw a lot of that in St. Petersburg. Go there, in any museum you'll find amazing statues made of very hard granite. And after they were made, some guy came along and chipped a triangle out of the letterer when he tried to sign it, because his hands were clumsy. And you can see that the hands of the craftsman who wrote his name on that statue were crooked. Exactly. The people who made this box did it way before those folks who made this little mess here. This is quality work, and that over there is just trash. Good work and garbage. It's absolutely obvious. Here's a really good example of what I'm talking about. There was some flaw in the stone here, and first they removed that imperfection. And why did they remove it? Well, because there was some kind of monstrous vibration inside this stone. Something powerful was happening, not just a bull lying around. But that's not certain. Yeah, that's not certain. But they really did find some animal remains, didn't they? Yeah, the very first archaeologist apparently described that. But that's just the story. How can we know for sure? That's the story, yeah, because I think no one could open those lids until the last century. It's just too difficult. There's not even enough space here to set up any kind of equipment. They're extremely heavy. But this is something meant for high energy, for something powerful. This isn't a box for burying a bull. It's the remains of high energy technology. And this was inherited by the Egyptians, not created by them. It's the descendants who scribbled all this junk here. Do you think that applies to all the texts, or just these ones? Yeah, the oldest objects have the highest quality workmanship. And these objects are clearly ancient. I found the highest quality hieroglyphs in the Temple of Seti at Abydos, as well as in the Temple of Hathor at Dendera. But they're all made in limestone. In granite, in Luxor, they probably turned out the best. Why is there such a huge gap between the technology used to make the sarcophagi and, for example, the plaques for those same Apis bulls? For some reason, historians aren't interested in answering this question. Supposedly, it just happened by chance that people could spend years of incredible effort on a sarcophagus, but somehow, the plaque, which is basically a signature, hardly interested anyone throughout history. And it even starts to feel like the signatures really do have a later origin. And I'm not just talking about Egypt here, maybe this is a more global phenomenon. It's just that this is one particular example of it, that yes, indeed, signatures were made much later, at some specific point in history. So, from my side, let's put all the facts together. Here's something related to high energy. So, with energy, how does it work, really? You need to generate it, you need to store it somewhere, you need to transmit it, move it, and you need to consume it somehow to produce something. So if you take this high voltage technology, it's just one node in that whole chain. But what is it for, specifically? For which part? We don't know yet. The only thing that's clear is that it's connected to high voltage. But do you think it's like our energy, some kind of electricity, or is it a different type of energy? We just got back from India, and in India we saw the caves of the drummers. Have you heard of those? And this box was made with that kind of knowledge. It must have been made with similar knowledge, because when we tried working with granite ourselves, it wasn't very interesting. At first, we broke all our metal tools. The crucial thing is, when you perform this action with considerable force, but remarkably with only one hand, we were equipped with a substantial 2-kilogram hammer and the absolute best, most meticulously hardened steel chisel available. If you're hammering with one hand, your productivity is almost zero. Nothing happens at all. But you can see traces from the old tools, they're huge. They could drive the chisel 2 or 3 centimeters into the rock. But when we do it, there's no effect at all, so we try to put in more effort, to hit harder. And when we did that, after 3 strikes, on the 4th strike, our hammer broke, the hammer just shattered. So the metal just can't withstand that kind of force. It's impossible to hit any harder. That's it, that's our limit for how hard we can strike. Yeah, this part made with a chisel, but this box, no way it was made with a chisel. Here, take a look at this. 500 years ago, for example, if I handed someone this thing, what do you think they'd say? They'd probably say it's a chisel. Yeah, or maybe they'd say it's some kind of mirror. Yeah, we even have fairy tales about things like this. Yeah. But if we gave them this thing, most people wouldn't have a clue what it is or what it's for. They don't know the methods we use to get an image to appear here on the screen. To them, it's just some random piece of earth, an odd chunk of rock or something. Yeah, But what makes this piece of plastic special is the knowledge of how it works, exactly what you need to do with it. Without that, it's just a piece of plastic. And even now, if something happens, we'd just be like, what is this? Absolutely no idea what this thing is. We'd look at it and think, it's just some little rectangle. We'd break it in half to see what's inside. Still wouldn't understand a thing. Some kind of religious mumbo-jumbo. There aren't any towers, no cell towers. Nothing works at all. And without those towers, well, it's just an object of worship. You could wear it on your chest or something. We have no idea what it is. If only we knew what it was, but we don't know what it is. The signal comes from that tower to here somehow. Still makes no sense. That's what it is. These boxes are the same thing. There's a ton of knowledge out there that we just don't know. So for us, they're just boxes for burying bulls. It's the same as with the phone. There's a special factory that makes these phones. 30,000 people work there. The actual phone manufacturing, the phone is small.
That's how it works, the actual production of phones. A phone is small, but behind it stands a massive amount of knowledge, all the knowledge we don't know. Yeah, and nobody knows how it works. Absolutely nobody. Yeah, people, they're just simple operators, not developers. If there's a reset, no one will be able to recreate even a phone, that little piece of plastic, let alone a huge chunk of stone. And what does it mean that it has fewer technologies, less hidden knowledge, less energy it can process? Where did all that come from? We just don't know. There's a huge amount of technology in this thing. How much is in that one, we can only guess. But compared to the pyramids, it's still small. Yeah, but compared to a phone, it's huge. Yeah, that was a sharp observation. Yeah, you just have to think about it in a reasonable way. Very few, again in my opinion, official historians, not only do they completely overlook the technological aspect of the development of ancient civilizations, considering it somehow insignificant. In other words, they simply didn't see it for all those 200 years, until we, the alternative thinkers with our overactive imaginations, came along and started throwing everything we could at their fan. And only then did they get moving, actually starting to pay some attention to the technological aspect of ancient civilizations. And in my opinion, there's very little talk about the fact that, the stones, they came from far away, not just along the Nile. So, it's like they somehow managed to transport things along the river using barges from 5,000 years ago, not rafts. I'd like to point out, there's no raft that could possibly haul, for example, the Aswan obelisk or one of the 30 obelisks that are located in Egypt. It's all complicated when it comes to rafts. Only a barge, an ancient barge, could really have been used for that somehow. Naturally, historians have no evidence of this whatsoever. And in general, honestly, they have a pretty mediocre attitude toward evidence, as if it doesn't really concern them. Their job is just to theorize, hypothesize, and come up with some ideas and assumptions. And it turns out, to write some narratives in black and white in a children's history textbook, you don't really need any strong evidence at all. This information really surprised me, honestly. And most, or at least a large part, of the aspects of daily life of the ancient Egyptians, and not just them, remains shrouded in mystery for us. A lot of it is still just within the realm of historians' speculation. But if you think about it, who are historians, really? What is science, anyway? It's something that's only about 200 years old. So, 200 years ago, we have to realize that all the modern scientists who now win Nobel Prizes and are held in high esteem and respect by society used to have to hide, because back then they were all considered outsiders. A gang of Giordano Brunos, quite literally. And on this planet, a completely different theoretical framework was in charge, which produced entirely different narratives. And those narratives were accepted by society even more readily than science is accepted today. So let's not forget that all this so-called official wisdom isn't actually that old, and everything could change again. Some new discoveries, some new achievements. Quantum physics could completely overturn Newtonian physics. It might turn out that our science isn't really science at all, but just a superficial and mistaken view of the world around us. No, you can actually see with your own eyes that things here are a bit crooked. There are no absolutely straight values. I'm not saying they're crooked, I'm saying they're imperfect. Yeah, but at the same time, look over here. A huge wall. Yeah. I saw sarcophagi in the Cairo Museum. They were made quickly, because there's a cut, a seam. If the blade goes off by even 2 centimeters in the wrong direction, you should already realize that something's not right. But it has to happen quickly, not take 2 weeks to cut 2 centimeters. You get what I mean? Yeah, I totally get it. Look at this corner here. Let's imagine we have a whole corner that needed to be cut like this, this, and this. And then inside this box, it's the same thing. You go down one side, then the other side, and then there's this point at the inner corner. How do you get to that point? Oh, you mean right in the corner itself? That's really hard. It has to be absolutely imperfect, 100%, because everything had to be done by hand. Yeah. So how? Well, you have to get in there and take a look somewhere. Got in. We need a bit of light. I thought I could reach it. Stand on me. No way. Come on. Dude. Get up. All right. I see it. But it looks imperfect. Everything's covered in dust. We need a bigger screen. But you can see that right in this corner, they didn't just bash it with a stone. Yeah, we've had enough of Aswan and those stupid boulders. But the tool they used there was pretty precise, because after all, it's a corner, and it's been carved out really well. The deeper you go into that corner, the finer the tool you need, the harder the metal has to be, and in the end, you basically end up with something like a needle. Yeah, when we're making this box and moving toward the corner, the tool gets smaller and smaller. But the steel has to be just as hard as what was used to make this surface. A tool of the same quality. No, this surface was not made using impact techniques at all, 100%. And that makes it even more complicated, because there are only 3 minerals harder than the quartz in granite, diamond, topaz, and ruby. And there are no metals at all. And corundum as well. And it's impossible to work with metals, all metals are softer. This surface was never worked with metals. And, yes. So really, diamonds are the only thing you can use on this stone. Out of all natural materials, only diamonds. So, if you don't have diamonds, you can't do anything. Or you need something else that's even harder than diamonds. But that just raises more questions, it doesn't answer any. It all starts to seem supernatural. We don't have a material like that, but for some reason, people find it even harder to believe than that silly narrative about chiseling with primitive tools. So where do we go from here? What story do we follow? This one or another? You know, there's this Russian team, and they have analyses from Luxor. They found vanadium inside those cuts there. Tiny traces of vanadium were detected. And vanadium is a very hard metal that melts at some insane temperatures, something like 3000, I don't remember exactly. But I'll send you the link later. Yeah, but this is really cool, of course. Do you know what thing is the most heavily guarded in the world? Technology, because it's the most complex thing you can create. Technology. But if you have it, then you're really something, of course. And all the signs of that technology are also heavily protected. Let's say you have some huge narrative that covers everything from east to west. And in this narrative, on one side you have all these boulders, and on the other, the supernatural. But we understand that the people who believe in the boulders simply won't let you look at the artifacts and think they're supernatural, because it's the same artifact that can testify to completely different things. It's just a story built around this box. It can testify to anything at all. The story is what matters. The main idea I want to get across today, especially in the context of our current reality, is this, friends, this is clear evidence. If we trust the official history, then what do we actually know as fact? That for about 1300 years, some dressed up men, though we don't know exactly what they were dressed in, what shape their beards were, or what kind of hat they wore on their heads. So, these guys, every 25 years or so, had to look for a bull in order to declare this bull the holy god Ptah, his incarnation on earth. Then, for 25 years, they would anoint the bull with oil, bathe him in tubs, publicly adore him in every possible way, and after that, they were supposed to throw him off a platform into the Nile, that is, drown him and start looking for a new bull. Guys, 1300 years. I have a question, what was the point of all this? But actually, that's not really a question, because both you and I understand that all of this was done for no reason at all, simply because humanity was foolish and engaged in completely useless, irrational things. Now the question is, how long is this going to go on? How many more years will it take before we stop looking for some bulls with white spots on their backsides and finally start agreeing with each other about some kind of shared reality where we can all live together, since, after all, we really do have just one world for all of us? So, think about that, and I'll see you in new videos.